During our anniversary dinner, she calmly confessed to cheating on me for 2 years, weeks of planning, and this was how it ended. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Here, I share real-life inspired stories from Reddit threads focusing on family, relationships, and life's unexpected twists. Today's story follows a character who, after facing betrayal and heartbreak, must rebuild their life. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like everything was falling apart? How did you pick yourself up again? Watch until the end to see how our character confronts the past and moves forward. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to keep the inspiration coming. It was a night that had all the markings of being perfect. The kind of night I had spent weeks planning for, meticulously selecting everything down to the smallest details. I had booked our anniversary dinner at the Tasting Room, a restaurant in downtown Chicago with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the skyline. I knew she loved it there. Our third anniversary was celebrated in the same spot, and I had gone all out, reserving our favorite corner table by the window, with a bottle of rare vintage wine that we both adored. I was ready to remind my wife, Sarah, of the love we had built over the years. I even bought a custom necklace for her, engraved with our wedding date. As we sat down to eat, everything felt right. I could see the smile she gave me, that same smile I fell in love with all those years ago. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we were going to get through this rough patch we'd been having. But I had no idea how wrong I was. We toasted to us. But just as I was about to take a sip, Sarah looked at me. There was something in her eyes, something distant, and it felt as though time stopped. She didn't speak for a moment, and then she did. Calmly, without a hint of emotion in her voice, she told me, "I've been cheating on you for 2 years, and I'm leaving." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. For a moment, I felt my entire world tilt. My hand froze midair, holding the glass of wine, and I waited for her to tell me it was a joke, some cruel prank. But her gaze never wavered, and the cold clarity of her words hit me like a freight train. She wasn't joking. The smile I had always loved, the woman I thought I knew, was a lie. I didn't react the way she expected. In fact, I did something I wasn't sure I could do. I smiled. I raised my glass, as if nothing had happened, and said, "To your new life." Sarah stared at me, her expression frozen. I could see the flicker of disbelief in her eyes. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She had probably expected tears, shouting, maybe even begging. Something that would show I still cared. Something that would leave a thread of hope dangling in the air for her. But I wasn't going to give her that. I wasn't going to let her see me break. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I was done letting her control how I felt. The moment stretched out in the quiet of the restaurant. The faint clinking of silverware against porcelain. The soft murmur of other patrons talking about their own trivial lives. Felt like I was suspended in time. I should have been angry. I should have lashed out. But instead, there was only a steady calm that seemed to envelop me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was numbness. But in that moment, I knew this was the only way forward. She wanted to break me, to see me crumble, but I wasn't going to give her that power. I looked at her again, trying to gauge if there was even a shred of remorse beneath that mask of calm. Her eyes darted to her phone, flicking nervously across the screen. She hadn't even looked up when I spoke. Maybe she thought if she kept her eyes down, if she kept her distance, she could somehow avoid the storm that was about to hit. But I wasn't going to let her escape this moment. I leaned back in my chair, still holding my glass, my thumb tracing the rim. There was an eerie stillness between us. I had been waiting for an explosion, for some dramatic meltdown, but there was no need for that anymore. All the anger I had felt during the last few months, all the frustration, the confusion, it had drained away into something more measured, something clear. And as I sat there, watching her continue to avoid eye contact, I realized something. She had already made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I didn't rush out of the restaurant or cause a scene. Instead, I stayed calm and ordered dessert like it was just another evening. The waiter came over, his cheery demeanor in stark contrast to the emotions swirling in the air around our table. I ordered the crème brûlée for her, though she didn't acknowledge it. For me, I chose the chocolate cake. Not because I really wanted it, but because it felt like a small act of rebellion against the moment that was spiraling out of control. But deep inside, I was torn. My heart was breaking, a million different thoughts crashing together. The sweet, reassuring memories of our early years together. The first time we held hands, the way we used to stay up late talking about our dreams, how she used to make me laugh. Those all came rushing back to me. How could she do this? How could she destroy everything we had? But the rage, the hurt, they didn't feel as urgent now. They felt like background noise to something much clearer. The quiet between us was suffocating. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of her face, slightly turned toward her phone, her eyes blank. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even uncomfortable. It was almost like she had already moved on. I swallowed back the bile rising in my throat, realizing she wasn't the woman I had once known. Then, as the waiter set our desserts down in front of us, I felt the weight of the moment. This was the moment I would remember, the moment that changed everything. The moment she didn't apologize, didn't regret. The moment she just moved on. I excused myself, stepping outside to catch my breath. The air was cool, sharp against my skin, but it brought clarity. The city sounds felt distant, muffled, as though I were separated from the chaos of the world for just a moment. I leaned against a brick wall, pulling my phone from my pocket. It was time to make the call. I dialed David, my lawyer. There was no point in hesitating anymore. "David, I need your help," I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. "I need everything in place. I don't care what it takes. I'm done with this." David didn't need me to explain. We had been preparing for this moment, even if I hadn't fully realized it. Over the last few months, as things had deteriorated, I had quietly started to make sure I had everything in order, just in case. Now it was time to act. Sarah wasn't going to walk away from this with everything. She wasn't going to get away with her betrayal. I hung up and stood there for a moment, letting the wind rush through my hair. I didn't feel like I was falling apart, but I knew I had just taken the first step toward rebuilding my life. I couldn't change the past, but I could change how it defined me. When I came back inside, Sarah hadn't moved. She was still hunched over her phone, her fingers tapping lightly against the screen. She looked at me for a brief second as I sat down, but quickly turned her gaze back to the device, probably texting him, the man she had been seeing behind my back. The thought of it sickened me, but I didn't show it. I glanced at her, my voice casual as I asked, "How are you going to explain this to the kids?" For the first time all night, she faltered. Her fingers froze on the screen, and her eyes lifted toward me, wide with shock. The confidence that had been on her face all night disappeared for just a second, replaced by a flicker of something else. Something I had never seen in her before. It was the beginning of her unraveling, and it wasn't pretty. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she just stared at me, as if the question had caught her completely off guard. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. For a brief moment, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was the truth, this was her consequence. No longer was she in control of the narrative. Now she had to face the reality of what she had done. She couldn't hide behind excuses or distractions anymore. "I don't know," she muttered, her voice weaker than I had ever heard it. She was no longer the confident, detached woman who had confessed to me earlier. There was doubt in her voice, and it made her seem so small. Her shoulders sagged, and for a split second, I saw her as the woman she once was. Someone I could have been proud of, someone I wanted to love. But that was before all this. Before the lies. Before the betrayal. I sat back in my chair, letting the silence fill the space between us. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shaking with rage. I wasn't even close to being broken. But I knew I was done. Done with the lies, done with the charade. Sarah had made her choice, and now I would make mine. This was the beginning of something new. Something I couldn't yet fully understand, but I knew it would be mine to control. The calm in the storm was just the beginning. As the days passed, the reality of what Sarah had done began to sink in. It wasn't the kind of pain you could ignore or push aside. It was a weight, a suffocating blanket of disbelief that wrapped itself around my chest every time I tried to focus on something else. I had known in the back of my mind for months. I had seen the signs, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences, but I had never wanted to face it. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. It wasn't, and now the truth had come crashing down on me. I hired a private investigator, someone I had been keeping tabs on Sarah with for months. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. I couldn't let this be a vague feeling, a gut instinct I couldn't act on. The investigator was meticulous, capturing every detail of Sarah's secret life. She provided me with everything I needed: photos of Sarah entering a hotel room with another man, receipts from expensive dinners I had never been a part of, hotel check-ins from places I had never heard of, even recordings of their phone conversations. It was more than I could stomach, but I couldn't look away. Sarah thought she had been sneaky. She thought she could keep this hidden, that she could play both sides of the fence without anyone noticing. But I had been watching from the shadows. Every step she took, every lie she told. It was all there, just waiting for me to uncover it. And now that I had it, I could no longer pretend that things would ever be the same. I knew the truth before Sarah did. I knew exactly what was going on, even though she thought she had everything under control. While she went on living her double life, pretending everything was fine, I was preparing for the inevitable. I had already made my peace with it. The divorce was just a formality. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The person I had once known, the woman I had loved, was gone. And in her place was a stranger who didn't care about anything but herself. But Sarah, as expected, still tried to play the victim. She kept calling. She kept sending messages. She even reached out to me on social media, apologizing, asking for reconciliation. I could hear the desperation in her voice every time we spoke. She wanted me to take her back. She wanted to come back into my life as if nothing had happened. She couldn't understand why I wasn't begging her to stay, why I wasn't crying or shouting, or at the very least asking for an explanation. It was all part of her manipulative game. She wanted to control the narrative, to twist the story so that she was the one suffering, the one who was wronged. But I wasn't playing along anymore. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story to suit her needs. Not this time. When the divorce papers were filed, Sarah's facade began to crack. She tried to cling to the remnants of our life. She cried. She begged. She even tried to blame me for everything, saying I had neglected her, that I didn't give her the attention she needed, that I hadn't been the husband I promised to be. I could see it all, every excuse she made, every attempt to shift the blame onto me. But it didn't work. It wasn't going to work. The woman who had once been my partner, my confidant, was gone. She had already made her choices, and now I had to make mine. It was in those moments when I saw the full extent of her manipulation that I realized how deep the lie went. She had made herself the victim, the innocent party, all while betraying me in the worst possible way. She had justified her actions in her mind, wrapped them in a narrative that made her feel better about what she'd done. I wasn't sure if she really believed it, or if it was just another defense mechanism she had created to survive the guilt. Either way, it didn't matter. I was done. I kept my distance, of course. I had to, but the calls kept coming. The text messages flooded my phone. Each time, it felt like a little piece of me was being chipped away. Every time I read her message, I could almost feel the pull, the desire to go back to what we had before all of this. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. The lies, the deceit. It was too much to ignore. There was no going back from here. I remember one particular afternoon when Sarah showed up at my office. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on the work I had been neglecting for weeks, when I saw her standing outside my office window. She was waiting for me. The image of her, standing there, her face pale, eyes desperate, was almost too much to bear. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking toward the door. As I opened it, she rushed in without saying a word. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't say anything at first. I simply looked at her, trying to process what had happened to the woman I had loved. She wasn't the same person anymore. The woman in front of me was broken, but it wasn't because of anything I had done. It was because of the lies she had built around herself. "I don't want this to be the end," she continued, her voice cracking. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. Fix this," I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "You think you can fix this? After everything you've done?" Her eyes welled up with tears. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I can't go back," I said quietly. "You've already made your decision, and now I have to make mine." She looked at me, as if she was searching for any sign that I might change my mind. But I couldn't. There was no more hope left, no more desire to make it work. I had seen who she really was, and I wasn't going to let her back into my life, not after everything. She tried to say more, but the words didn't matter anymore. It was too late. The damage had been done, and there was no fixing it. When I filed the divorce papers, I felt an odd sense of relief. The weight of carrying the truth around, of hiding my anger and sadness, was finally lifted. The truth was out. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. Sarah could no longer manipulate me. The games were over, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of freedom. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about reclaiming my life, my peace, and my future. I was done with her. The person I once knew was gone. In her place was a stranger who didn't care about anything but herself. And I wasn't going to let her destroy my life anymore. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. After everything was settled, I moved to a smaller, quieter neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. The house I found wasn't much, but it had a certain charm to it. An old, two-story home with a small backyard surrounded by a wooden fence. It was a modest place, not flashy or expensive, but it was perfect for starting over. For the first time in a long while, it felt like a place I could breathe again. The city was a distant hum behind us now, its bustling energy still in my memory, but I no longer felt its pull. The loud, endless noise of Chicago had been replaced by a more tranquil life, one that allowed me to process, reflect, and rebuild. My kids, Jack and Emma, were adjusting, though it wasn't easy for them. They missed the old house, their old friends, the routines they had once known. But we were building something new together, a fresh start. We settled into a new rhythm. I woke up early to make breakfast for the kids, scrambled eggs, toast, and sometimes, if I was feeling fancy, pancakes. Jack had always loved pancakes. I used to make them for him back when Sarah and I were still together, but now it was a way to ground myself, to connect with my kids. I could see the smile on Jack's face every morning, and even though it was quiet in the house, it felt like we were starting to fill the empty spaces Sarah had left behind. As the days passed, I threw myself into work. I didn't have the same passion for it that I used to, but it helped keep my mind from wandering. I wasn't living in the shadow of Sarah's betrayal anymore. She no longer had a place in my head, no longer held any power over my emotions. It wasn't easy. Sometimes, memories of her would flash unexpectedly, or I'd catch myself wondering how things could have been different. But I stopped myself every time. I had made it through the worst of it. Now, it was time to build something better, something stronger for myself and the kids. The mornings were the hardest. The house was quiet without Sarah's presence. There were no late-night arguments, no awkward silences. But there was also no laughter, no comfort of her presence. The silence was both a relief and a reminder. And in that silence, I began to rediscover things about myself that I had forgotten. I started to pick up old hobbies, things I used to enjoy before life became consumed by family, responsibilities, and the bitterness of betrayal. I took up painting again. Not that I was good at it, but I loved it. I would sit in the corner of the living room, in front of a blank canvas, and let my thoughts pour onto the page. The brushstrokes were therapeutic, each one a release of the tension that had been building inside me for months. It wasn't easy, but I had a new sense of purpose. I wasn't the broken man I had been just a few months ago. The pieces of me that Sarah had shattered were slowly being put back together. And even though it took time, I knew the kids and I were going to be okay. Then came Claire. Claire had moved into the house next door a few months after we settled in. I remember the first time we met. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was struggling with a lawnmower that refused to start. The weather was warm, and the smell of fresh-cut grass filled the air as I tugged the starter cord again. Frustrated. "You need a hand with that?" a voice called out. I looked up to see Claire standing at the end of the driveway, a friendly smile on her face. She wasn't trying to pity me, wasn't trying to be a savior. She just offered help, plain and simple. I waved my hand dismissively at first. "I've got it," I said, but it was obvious I didn't. "Let me help?" she insisted with a laugh, walking toward me. "Looks like you've been at it for a while." There was something about her warmth, her easygoing nature, that made me feel like it was okay to let my guard down. Just a little. She knelt down next to the mower, tugged on the cord once, twice, and with a firm pull, the engine roared to life. I couldn't help but laugh, feeling a strange sense of relief. "Thank you," I said, still chuckling. "I think I've been trying to fix that thing for a week." "No problem," she replied with a smile. "I've been there. Sometimes it's the simplest things that cause the most frustration." We chatted for a few more minutes about the house, about the neighborhood. Claire didn't pity me. She didn't look at me like I was broken. She just saw me for who I was, a guy trying to get by. And for the first time in a long time, that felt good. She didn't know about Sarah or what had happened. She didn't need to. She was just there, a neighbor, a friend. Over the next few weeks, Claire and I started spending more time together. She came over for coffee now and then, and we would talk about the weather, about our kids, about everything and nothing. It wasn't anything romantic, at least not at first. But with her, it felt like I could breathe a little easier. She helped me fix up the house, painting the walls of the living room a light blue, something bright and welcoming. We would sit on the porch afterward, sipping iced tea and watching the kids run around in the yard. Her presence was soothing, a quiet kind of peace that I hadn't realized I needed. There were no complicated motives, no hidden agendas. She was just there, and that was enough. It was simple things, fixing up the house, watching movies with the kids on lazy Sundays. I hadn't realized how much I had missed those small moments. They meant more than anything. Every time I looked at Claire, I felt like I was getting closer to a version of myself I had lost along the way. I started to feel a spark of hope again, something I thought had died after everything with Sarah. The kids adored her, and that meant everything to me. Jack especially. He would run up to her every time she came over, showing her his latest project or asking her to help him with his homework. Emma, who was quieter, would ask her to read books with her, curling up next to her on the couch. It wasn't just that Claire was kind and caring. She made them feel safe, something they hadn't had in a long time. They saw her as someone who was there for them, and that meant more than I could put into words. It was slow, but I started to see the possibility of a future beyond the pain Sarah had caused. A future that didn't feel defined by betrayal, but by the choices I made to heal, to rebuild, and to love again. There was still a long way to go, of course. The scars of the past would always be with me, but I was learning how to live with them. And for the first time in a long time, I was allowing myself to imagine a life that didn't revolve around Sarah. A life that was mine and the kids. A life that was full of possibility. I wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Months went by, and the scars from the past began to heal. At first, the healing was slow, a delicate process that seemed to take more time than I anticipated. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the heaviness in my chest began to lift. I thought I was done with Sarah. I truly believed I had moved on. My life had taken on a new rhythm, a new peace. But life, as it often does, has a funny way of surprising you. One late afternoon, I sat at my desk, sorting through some work documents, when my phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the screen and saw her name, Sarah. A mix of anger, disbelief, and confusion washed over me. I hadn't heard from her in months. The last time we spoke, it had been about the divorce, her trying to manipulate the situation, to paint herself as the victim. Since then, I had cut all ties, focusing on the life I was rebuilding with Claire and the kids. I stared at the phone for a moment, unsure of what to do. Her number flashed on the screen, her name like a weight on my chest. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the past remain where it belonged, in the past. Another part of me, the part one thought I had buried deep down, still wanted to be the man who could help. Even after everything, there was a small part of me that felt responsible for her, the part that had once loved her deeply and cared for her happiness above all else. But that part was getting smaller and smaller. I didn't respond immediately. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, unsure. There was a part of me that wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, to understand the consequences of the path she had taken. I didn't owe her anything, but there was also a part of me that knew this was the last chance for closure. I called my lawyer, David, to make sure everything was in order. I needed to be prepared. Sarah's calls had been becoming more frequent lately, each one more desperate than the last. She wasn't just trying to mend things. She was falling apart. And this time, it wasn't going to be like the last. This wasn't a call for reconciliation. This was a call for survival. When I finally agreed to meet with her, I wasn't sure what I was walking into. I thought I had moved on completely. I thought I had let go of all the pain she had caused. But when I saw her, standing there in front of me, I realized how much I had changed, and how much she had not. She was a shell of the woman I had once loved. There were no more excuses, no more blame shifting, no more justifications. She stood there, her eyes sunken, her shoulders slumped. The confident, self-assured Sarah I once knew had vanished. She looked lost, a stranger to me now. Her hands trembled as she spoke, her voice small and weak. "Marcus, I don't know what to do. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my reputation. I'm at the end of the line here," she said, her voice cracking as she looked up at me. I watched her, my eyes hardening with every word she said. For a moment, I could almost feel sorry for her. I could almost sympathize. But then I remembered everything she had done. The lies, the deceit, the way she tore my world apart and walked away like it was nothing. There was nothing left to fix. "You ruined everything," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You don't get to come back now. You don't get to walk back into my life like you never left." There was no anger in my tone, no frustration, just a cold finality. It wasn't that I didn't feel anything, of course I did. The years we spent together, the memories we shared, they weren't easily erased. But I had done the work. I had healed and I had built something better. Sarah stood there, stunned into silence. She had expected something different, I could tell. Maybe she thought I would be the same man, the one who would rush to fix things, to put the pieces back together. But I wasn't that man anymore. That man was gone. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. I could see the flicker of realization in her eyes. She understood now. This wasn't a moment of reconciliation. It was the end, the final goodbye. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came. Finally, she closed her mouth, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but I didn't respond. What was there left to say? The apology was empty. It meant nothing now. It was too late for that. I left her there, standing in the same spot where our life had once been built, knowing it was no longer mine to save. I turned my back on her, walking out of the room and back into my life. That night, I returned home to Claire and the kids. The warmth of their laughter and the soft glow of the living room lights washed over me as I stepped inside. The house was quiet, comfortable, and filled with love. It was everything I had wanted, everything I had worked for. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. We sat around the table, laughing and talking about our day. Jack and Emma were telling me about school. Claire was asking about my work, and I just listened, letting the normalcy of our lives wash over me. I looked around at the life I had rebuilt, and I knew I had done the right thing. I didn't need Sarah's approval. I didn't need her in my life anymore. What mattered was that I had found peace. And that peace had a name, Claire. What do you think about the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. Feel free to leave a comment below. Your feedback means a lot. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you can be the first to hear the next story coming your way. Thank you for sticking with me through this one. Your support is everything. See you next time, and remember, every story brings us closer to understanding each other.